Madam Chairperson, are you ready?
They split it up, I think the sister and the two brothers.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call to order our first and only hearing of the evening. This is the application of Elizabeth and Christopher Stokel. Thank you. Thank you. I know you did. I was told how to pronounce your name before we started this. And I blew it. I apologize.
All right.
I do apologize. The applicants reside at 34 Forest Street in Milton. They filed an application dated August 26th with the Board of Appeals seeking a special permit from the terms of Section 3A of the zoning bylaw. They're proposing to import approximately 2,691 cubic yards of fill on the subject property at 34 Forest Street for the purpose of constructing a new home, raising the foundation of the new home to an elevation that would be above the current water table. The bylaw requires that a special permit is required for the importation of more than 1,000 cubic fill for the purpose of constructing a single-family home unless authorized by a special permit. The property here lies in a Residence A zoning district. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. To my immediate right is board member Virginia Donahue King, and to my immediate left is board member Jeffrey Mullen. We're happy to have Mr. Mullen. He's been a frequent member of recent boards. We're going to have as evidence at the hearing, when Mr. Mullen gives me back the documents, I can tell you what evidence. We have the application dated August 26, 2016. We have a denial letter by Mr. Prondak dated August 27, 2019. The applicants are being represented by attorney Marion McGettrick of 10 Crown Street in Milton, Massachusetts. Mrs. McGettrick has filed with us a letter of August 26, 2019, describing the application, the proposed evidence, and the reason why the special permit should issue. Attached to that is a Merrill Engineering report on 36 Forest Street, dated August 6, 2016, and it's signed by Deborah Keller, PE, Senior Project Manager of Merrill. I believe Ms. Keller is with us this evening. Hello, good to see you. We also have a set of drawings. First of all, a plot plan of the property, then a series of technical drawings, which I will leave to Ms. Keller, together with a stormwater design summary. It's dated April 26th, as revised on August 1st, 2019, which describes the project and the various standards that need to be met, and I will leave all of that to Ms. Keller's trustee testimony, including there is an Appendix C, which is a long-term pollution prevention plan. Mrs. McGettrick also has given us a deed to the property, which was acquired by the applicants on January 25th, 2019. The deed is dated the 23rd, 2019. We have a Maps Online site plan of the subject area, including the subject property. We have a letter of August 20th, 2019 from Eaglebrook Engineering, and it's to Mr. John Rowe and Mr. Philip Johanning at 23 Parkwood Drive. I believe that Mr. Michael Giuliano, a PE and professional land surveyor and a principal at Eaglebrook, is representing Mr. Rowe and Mr. Johanning in this matter. And we have a series of plans by Merrill Engineering. They're dated December 19, 2018, as revised on August 1st, 2019. It's in multiple sheets. I'm not going to go through the various sheets. The rules of the board are first, we'll hear from the applicant, we'll hear from people who have questions of the applicant, we'll hear from people who wish to speak in support of the application, and we'll hear from anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application. I think, without further ado, Mrs. McGettrick, welcome back to the Board of Appeals. Good to see you again.
very good to be here.
Why don't you tell us about the application and why the board should consider this application favorably?
Thank you. I'll be happy to do that. We have with me tonight Christopher and Elizabeth Stokel, the applicants, and the applicant's engineer, Deborah Keller, is here and will be able to provide further information about the stormwater management plan. Since this application has lasted for a while because it was a previous hearing before the board, I'm just quickly going to review where we are now and where we've come from.
Great, thank you.
The stormwater design analysis dated August 1st, 2019, has been updated twice since the initial report dated April 26, 2019. Each update has been reviewed by Michael Giuliano at the applicant's expense, and I'll explain who Michael Giuliano is a bit further on.
Thank you.
We've provided letters from Michael Giuliano dated June 4th and August 20th, which have provided his analysis and his conclusions about the stormwater drainage plan. The application was first filed on March 29th. It was for a special permit for importation of fill in excess of 1,000 cubic yards under Section 4A, and for determination of relief, if required, for the use of a new barn with caretaker's quarters as a temporary housing while the house is being constructed. After the application, Philip, Joe Henning, and John Rowe, neighbors at 23 Parkwood Drive, asked the applicants if they would be willing to pay for another engineer, Michael Giuliano of Eaglebrook Engineering, to review the stormwater analysis. And the applicants have agreed to that, and Michael Giuliano has completed 2 reviews of the plan and updated versions. The applicants engaged me to represent them and acknowledged that I have been representing Thayer Nursery, who is in a butter, for their landscaping permit appeal and the application to renew their permit, and Thayer Nursery has provided me with a written statement of no objection to this representation.
Great, thank you very much.
I'm familiar with Thayer's permit conditions requiring a stormwater drainage system be installed and provided, and did provide the plans for this system to this applicant's engineer at her request prior to completion of the stormwater drainage plan and before filing the March application to the Board of Appeals. The applicants have been aware from the time that they began to develop these plans of how important it is that stormwater flows onto Thayer Nursery and other downgradient property not be increased. It's also a standard that they have to meet if they're going to develop the property. To avoid compromising the stormwater drainage system, Thayer's been required to install as a condition of their landscaping permit. They were aware of the high water table issue on this lot and have worked with their engineer and architect to address both the high water table in their design and the stormwater flow control issues in their plans. So that's where we are at this date. What's happened is that in early August, the second revision was completed of the design, and that is the design before you tonight. The stormwater plan was revised by August 1st, but the engineer also revised her estimate of the required amount of fill, and it exceeded what was in the original application. This meant the applicants had to ask to withdraw their application without prejudice. The board agreed to that, and we're here before you tonight on a new application. And now the application is only for approval of a special permit for importation of fill over 1,000 cubic yards because the applicants have revised their plans and removed the garage, the barn proposal entirely from the proposal. The standard the applicants are required to meet for a special permit is that they will not cause substantial detriment if the permit is approved. The standard they're required to meet under DEP regulations and a general standard would be that they're not supposed to, they cannot increase the flow of stormwater off their property after development from existing conditions. So I've brought with me tonight a table which you already have, which is the August 1st stormwater plan, and it shows the flow, existing conditions and after construction. And the table shows you that there will be no increase. There is actually slight decrease in the amount of stormwater flow estimated to occur after construction. That's just an extra copy.
Okay, and this was filed with the application.
You already have it, and
Thank you.
And I also have with me tonight, just for your files, a complete copy of the 100-page stormwater analysis, which should be in your file. This is the revised one from August 1st. You have the one from
Do you think
last
it is in the file, or it
No,
should
it
be?
is not. The one you have is the one that was revised May 31st, so you should have a copy of that.
And we'll take this as evidence at the hearing.
Okay. The applicants agreed to have the second engineer review the drainage plans, and in May 2019, certain changes were incorporated into these plans at the request of Michael Giuliano, the second engineer. After his review of the again revised plan in August, Michael Giuliano did not request any further changes and has provided a favorable review of the drainage plan. The orientation of the proposed residence has been changed since our original application, so that it is now, this is a rectangular, we have the site plan in a large version here, so you can kind of see this as I talk, and you also have large copies in your files. The orientation of the house has been changed so that it's a rectangular house, and it now faces 4th Street. This is the Thayer Nursery site over here. This is the garage. There were various reasons for changing that design, but in the course of doing that, some of this issue of where there had to be fill imported became important, and that's one reason there's additional fill that's required. Behind the house, there's landscaping, there's a proposed patio, above deck, a proposed swimming pool area. There's going to be, in the drainage plan, a rain garden, that's on the same side as Thayer Nursery. And there's a septic system with a holding tank and a leaching field, I guess you call it, up here in this corner of the property. So the orientation of the buildings has changed since your original application.
Can you explain the green? What is the green?
Deborah Keller.
Sure. Thank you very much.
The dark green out front is existing tree vegetation. The outer line here is existing, this is existing outer line, this in here is, this is existing up to this point, and this is where we'd be clearing. The existing tree line runs down here along, and this is all open meadow currently. So this is where we're maintaining this, and so the lighter green will be proposed lawn or retained as meadow currently, either or. That condition, obviously, where the leaching field will be lawn, and where we have proposed grading would then be treated as lawn. The lighter, whiter color here is patio area around the pool and in the backyard. The brown is the house, and the gray is new driveway.
What's the driveway made out of?
Asphalt proposed.
As you know, the site has a high water table, and that requires that the foundation of the house be elevated above the water table. And that's why additional fill is required on a lot like this.
Maren, could I ask you one question? It's a technical question. You probably know the answer to it. It may be silly. But depending on where the cameras are here, can the people on TV see this if it's lying flat on the table?
I can put it on the easel if that's helpful.
I think it might be.
I think that would be
then
helpful
they will be able
in the
to see
event
it,
that somebody
because
wants-
they can focus the camera on the...
That's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Might take me a minute.
Yeah, that's
Sure,
all right.
take- no,
I'll
take your
I'll just
time.
finish, I'm almost done with these remarks. So anyway, there is excess fill. The total amount of fill required is 2,691 cubic yards estimated, and more, and so that's 1,691 cubic yards more than the 1,000 that you would be allowed without a special permit for a new house. And that's in the engineer's cut and fill letter, which is in your materials. In order to approve the special permit, you have to determine that there'll be no substantial detriment to the neighborhood. Testimony at the initial hearing and application indicated that the concern of the neighborhood is as to whether stormwater runoff onto their properties will be increased. The applicant's efforts from the beginning of planned development have focused on this issue, working with their engineer to design a stormwater management plan that will ensure that stormwater flow off the premises after development will not increase. They're required to do that They're not required by the town's bylaws or DEP regulations to file a stormwater plan because it's a single-family development. But in this case, a stormwater plan was very important in order to show that there would be no detriment to surrounding properties. So this plan is a detailed plan, and it's similar to what you might see in a multifamily development, but it has been completed for this single-family development.
Can I ask you something about the DEP? Do you get the permit before or after you come to us?
There isn't any requirement
Okay.
for single-family development,
Okay.
a single lot. They don't have to go to DEP, they don't have to go to the Conservation Commission for the stormwater. Actually, they don't have to anyway because there's no wetlands on the property. They
Okay.
would, if this were multifamily
Okay.
development, have to go to the
Thank you.
town and file a stormwater plan with the town, and the town would have to review that plan and approve it.
Yep.
Depending on what board you were before, the board would have requirements as well.
Thank you.
Before an occupancy permit is granted for the completed house, the usual procedure is that as-built plans certified by an engineer will be required by the building department, confirming that the house and the site have been constructed as shown on the approved construction plans, including the stormwater control structures, and an as-built plan for the septic system design, which has already been approved by the Board of Health as a design, will be required by the Board of Health for final approval of the septic system as installed. In Michael Giuliano's August letter, he asked that there be a requirement that there be as-built plans filed, certified by an engineer. So they certainly could be, that could be required in the special permit. It will be part of the town's procedure anyway. There's another request in the letter from Michael Giuliano that there be review of the drainage control structures during construction by an engineer. That's something that the board will probably want to discuss, and I assume that Merrill Engineering could provide such a review or some kind of information satisfactory to the board that they've been installed. There is a plan in the stormwater management plan for construction, and the plan describes what the protections are that are supposed to be installed. Deborah Keller is here tonight, and I thought that it would be useful to everybody to have her explain in more detail what the stormwater management plan is, what the obligations of the applicants are to protect other properties through their plans, and to answer questions that you may have.
Can I ask you one question?
Yes.
Was there also a request by Mr. Joe Hanning and Mr. Rowe to have the system examined, or whatever technically you do on an annual basis, and certified as compliant? And
There might have been in an earlier letter. He didn't mention it in the last letter, but there is in the stormwater management plan a maintenance plan,
Okay.
and it requires certain steps be taken by the applicant. So that's in the public record. If there were to be a problem and they could not demonstrate that they had taken those steps, that they had done their inspections, that they'd cleaned out, it's actually quite detailed, even as to the rain garden, as to cleaning out and replanting species of plants and that kind of thing, they would certainly have a problem, I would
and
say.
who was that filed with on behalf of the town? It's not filed.
You could establish a requirement that it be filed, that there be some kind of report filed with the building commissioner. I think probably most appropriately with the building commissioner who reviews all these other plans.
And then it will be available to the public.
And it would be available to the public. It would just be a report saying, these were our requirements, this is what we did. And it's also one way of reminding homeowners after a project like this is finished that they do have to complete these maintenance tasks.
Okay. But I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
No, I remember that too, so we may hear more from that from people who are here. But, so is it okay if Deborah?
Sure, welcome to the Board of Appeals. It's good to see you.
Again, my name is Deborah Keller with Merrill Engineers. As stated, we've gone through...
Could I ask you to do one thing?
Yes, please.
Speak into the microphone. We should have handheld mics. I don't know why we don't.
I'll hold it.
Because that doesn't project, it just does the TV.
Sure.
Okay.
As stated, we've gone through a couple of different iterations of this design. I know what I'd like to do is start with existing conditions, and I can go through a step process as to what we evaluated and how we came to the design that we have. As Marion mentioned, we did get the Thayer property drawings, so we incorporated them into our review and analysis. So it's kind of light, but this is the property here. Subject property. This is Thayer Nursery. I apologize, the landscaping, I couldn't alter that. And these are the abutting properties. Sorry, I have to take my glasses off to read the plan. And so what we do when we look at existing conditions is look at flow patterns of the surface runoff. We're also going to look at different storm events. We go and we run across the range from a 2-year storm event, which is an event that typically happens every 2 years, one at 10 years, one at 25, and then the larger storm event, which is a 100-year storm. So those are the 4 storms that we look at when we evaluate a drainage design. And we start with existing conditions. We look at the area that we're working on, what is the flow patterns across, and currently on this site we flow towards Thayer Nursery in a northerly direction. As I stated before, this primary property is primarily open field meadow with some bordering tree line along the northerly property line. So ultimately, the flow patterns for the property end up into the Thayer Nursery drainage system. It flows across the site. There is a stone channel along the property line which directs water down to this corner, makes a turn, and flows into their stormwater facility. Also, the rear field, abutting field property also flows to this corner and then continues across the Thayer property. So we have the large portion of the existing property flows to the northerly property line, our northerly property line, adjoining with Thayer, and runs down the channel and around. There is one small portion here which kind of comes across, then goes across the existing rear meadow area and ultimately ends it. So we picked this as our design point because ultimately that's where all our stormwater runoff is going. We look at the surface conditions. As I said, we have currently meadow area with some vegetated or forested areas along the front Forest Street as well as the Thayer property line. There is a gravel driveway path that comes through and spreads out then into the field. So this is the existing curb cut that we're utilizing for the proposed driveway. We analyze that, we run it through a program called HydroCAD, which creates hydrographs, and it models the storm event for a 24-hour storm event period. And as those results come, we look at what the flow pattern is. And if you look at that table that Marion had given you, for example, the 2-year storm, I know these numbers don't mean too much, but the flow rate was 1.3 cubic feet per second, and the volume was 0.134 acre feet. So those would be the numbers that we would look at, and in our design, when we alter this site, we need to meet that or reduce our proposed numbers so that we can feel comfortable in saying that we will not negatively impact any down gradient properties, drainage systems, etc. So the next step would be to lay out our proposed design, and obviously with the proposed design, I apologize, this one's an old version, it's got the barn on it, but so we don't have the barn anymore. But what it shows you is the the new structures that are going to be on the property, so we calculate out the impervious surfaces such as driveways, roof area, and in our currently proposed plan, we have pool and patio area to the rear. So we calculate out this, we look at the watershed areas, and currently right now what happens is this side of the flow that comes this way comes around and is diverted around and has a longer flow path, but ultimately ends up at that design point that I had just mentioned previously. The front area runs around and has a long flow path down to that point again. The roof is proposed to tie into roof leaders, and we have two systems of their roof dry wells, so they're chambers with crushed stone surround. So what we're trying to do here is capture the roof runoff and infiltrate that back into the ground. Again, we also are looking to capture some of the driveway as well as some of the pool and patio area, impervious areas here, which grade down and are directed into a rain garden just north of the garage entrance here. That again is somewhat of a simple detail, but what rain garden typically has about 2 feet of plant material, which helps filter the stormwater runoff, also allowing for some infiltration into groundwater and slowing the flow off the site because it will spill out, and we have a spillway here on this side which allows for a longer flow pattern before it gets to that design point again to help allow for more water to be absorbed by the property before going into the down gradient stormwater facility. With that, we modeled that same design point, and in the table again, for a 2-year storm event, our proposed conditions, we reduce the peak rate from 1.3 in existing down to 0.9.
Excuse me.
And then the peak volume goes from 0.134 in existing to 0.105. So there is a slight, as mentioned, a slight reduction. And you can see that in all 4 storm events evaluated. And so we do present this project as meeting that standard, that we're not increasing peak rate or volume at the down gradient sites. So I think that was the main concern. We're also, if we go through the standard compliance for stormwater management, which is partly DEP, but it also applies to the stormwater bylaw in town for compliance. The first standard is no new untreated discharge. Therefore, we're treating through swales, rain garden, and dry well for any new development on the site. We just went through the peak rate, so we are meeting our peak rates, matching existing or slightly reducing. The next standard, standard 3, is for groundwater recharge. As I stated, and as stated for the site, it is a challenging site for soil conditions as well as groundwater. But we are doing everything that we can by promoting groundwater recharge for the roof runoff as well as portions of the site by directing it to the rain garden. With that said, we are increasing the amount of required groundwater recharge. If you calculate it out, we're supposed to recharge 250 cubic feet between all of the systems that we have on the site. We have the potential to recharge 1,755, so there's a large increase there. And the reason we see that bigger increase is because we have to meet those peak rates and volumes, and the best way to do that is to recharge on site to attenuate for the proposed improvements. Next standard is standard 4, which is water quality. As mentioned, we have a long-term pollution prevention plan as well as maintenance plan. to look at the treatment and functionality of all of the systems that are on the site, making sure that the roof dry wells don't get clogged and are still functioning. Maintaining the rain garden includes cleaning the mulch when it needs to be cleaned, removing dead plants, replanting the vegetation. Vegetation is a great way of also reducing runoff by plant uptake, absorbing surface runoff. Standard 5 doesn't apply. It's for land use with higher potential pollutant loads, which are more like a mall parking lot that you generate. I believe it's 1,000 trips per day. That obviously isn't a single-family home. Standard 6 is for critical areas, and that does not apply to this project as well, so it is therefore not applicable. Standard 7 is for redevelopment projects, and a single-family home is not considered a redevelopment project, so again, it's not applicable. Standard 8 is for construction period pollution prevention and erosion control plans. It's not shown on this, well, actually it is, I apologize. It's usually red. But we do have an erosion control around the property to help prevent any sediment runoff off the site during construction before the site is fully stabilized, grass growing, et cetera. There is a summary too as for the maintenance of that and during construction. Any potential repairs that need to happen have to happen during construction, et cetera. Standard 9 is an operation and maintenance plan, which is the long-term source control and pollution prevention plan and operation and maintenance, and that goes and again reviews the right now on this site, dry well and the rain gardens primarily for maintenance and inspections. And that goes to the yearly inspections that we spoke about. Standard 10, finally, is a prohibition for illicit discharge. At this point, we don't anticipate any illicit discharge. That would be someone pumping water that shouldn't be flowing down other than rain. Washing a truck, spilling fuel, cleaning the driveway, that kind of thing.
We've seen that.
Yeah, okay.
I still see it.
So that's a full summary of how we went through the stormwater design and how we came up with the design to meet the criteria needed. If you'd like, I could go through the long-term inspection report, but it is in here. We identify each facility, which first is the subsurface infiltration system, roof dry wells, and the protection that's needed during construction would be so that we protect these locations so you don't have heavy equipment traveling back and forth over that area, which would compact the material and make it even harder for groundwater recharge to happen there. That same idea and component would happen within the rain garden area. And we would like, obviously, once the foundation is in, all three of those locations would be protected until they're established. The subsurface...
Can I ask you what pages are you looking at in your report?
It is the last, if you go all the way to the end. They're not, I apologize, not numbered. There you go.
Please.
So, yeah, if you go to keep going back one more page. No, I'm sorry, forward.
Forward.
I apologize.
I'm not good at this. You've got to-
There you go, right there.
Okay, great. I guess it's not numbered, but
No, unfortunately.
It's an appendix.
it's an appendix, and it's dated July 26, 2019.
Yes. So this was basically the stormwater components really haven't changed from the original design. We were always going to use roof dry wells and a rain garden. Their locations on the site have changed with the redesign of the house location, et cetera. So in this report, we identify the inspection and maintenance steps for the subsurface and what to do if they're not functioning, how the homeowner would be able to clean them out, excavate, and repair them, which we hope.
Through your trusty company, I hope.
Oh, they could have a landscaper do it.
Okay.
Wouldn't have to be us. And also, the next one is the rain garden and any swales that are generated on the site. So we do create somewhat of a natural swale in the front. This is a low point on the site already, so we have created a longer swale along there, and we would want the homeowner to maintain that, not fill it in. And therefore, we have yearly inspections for both that and the rain garden to, again, to make sure the plantings, the soil material are well functioning. And the criteria for the soil mix that needs to go in the rain garden is provided on the plan set. And as Marion mentioned, we did get review and approval for the septic system to the rear of the site. And that location has stayed, the leaching field location has stayed the same.
Good, have you finished up?
I think that's it, unless there's any questions.
Mr. Mullen usually does have a question or two. Mr. Mullen? Floor is yours.
Is there a plan of the current contours of the lot?
It should be shown on the site plan, and it's a lighter color line dashed, and the proposed are the solid. I could show you one here.
I got it.
Okay. Sometimes when we print them out, I
So
unfortunately.
what degree of confidence do you have that those contours are going to be able to be retained over time? And is there any form of lateral support to maintain that? Or is it just all we're really talking about is mounding and it'll all appear to be very natural?
That was the goal. We tried to do that, especially in the front. So this is, I believe this is slightly greater than a 3-to-1 slope as it comes down in the front here. We've tightened it up on this, on the side of the driveway, which is there, so that we can generate this swale.
That's like 4 feet though, right?
Yes, there's a retaining wall along the driveway here, so that we
So
keep
the
that
house is going to
low.
be fairly, if you're standing there at the bottom of that mound in the grass, in the front lawn,
Here.
the house, you're going to be looking up and the driveway and the house are going to be 4 feet above.
4 feet above this area. But what happens is actually Forest Street comes up 2 feet. So you're at 198 at Forest Street, you go down 2 feet, and then you come back up 2 feet to the driveway, and then the first floor is 2 feet higher than the driveway. So
And
you'll-
where is the fill mostly going to be placed, the fill that's going on the property?
Most of the fill is on this side of the site.
Fill in that depression.
Yes.
I see.
Yes, because the site goes from high and flows this way.
So there's no knot, it's all the lateral support is going to be provided naturally by the placement or the planting of vegetation.
Yes.
And you said you weren't sure whether it was going to be lawn or meadow?
Well, like, for example, these are the limits of the grading that we're showing here. So this, if they,
A lot of lawn.
owners wanted to,
That's a huge amount of lawn.
it is, and they could have it as lawn, or they could keep it as the open meadow that it is.
Does it
now.
matter from your perspective with
No.
respect to your
No,
calculations?
it does not.
On the swale on the left along Thayer Nursery, is that a natural swale?
There is a natural swale there now, and what we're doing is creating a new one parallel to the one that they have on Thayer Nursery, so that we keep the flow on our property. We didn't want
What
to.
is a swale? Tell me what that is from, as used here. We're talking about stone?
No, a grassed swale.
It's depression.
Yeah, natural
You're trying to
depression.
just channel the water into that location as it flows northeast.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Just a second, John.
Sure, take your time.
Who enforces the plan?
Well,
The building,
It's building.
the building inspector requires an as-built certified plan
before the applicants can receive an occupancy permit, including the plan for the site improvements. So there's a lot of review that the building inspector has to do of the plan. The as-built plan from the engineer, has to be certified by an engineer properly licensed, will presumably show that they've installed everything and they've built the house as described here.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then it has to be addressed.
I'm not so concerned with the, the condition of building it as proposed, because there's a bright line on the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, It's really 3 years from now. If this failed, it doesn't feel I think it feels like the answer is it's not affirmatively enforced, it's enforced if there's a problem?
Yes.
Or is there actual active monitoring of this by a town personnel?
Well, it depends on what the Board of Appeals decides it
Does
wants
the
to
plan
establish
itself
as
call for that?
conditions. No, but it does call for the owner to maintain all of the structures and all of the plan features.
So the only
The obligation is that the owner will maintain it, and there's an annual requirement that they be done, certain things be done annually, certain things perhaps would have to be done as they needed to be done. It would be, if a board wanted to say that there's a condition that the building commissioner should inspect annually, or that he should receive the report, which would be logical, because he's the one who does enforcement. The other way that it would happen, of course, is if a problem develops, you would then have to go back and look at whether all this has been
Yeah,
maintained.
it feels like the latter is the default.
Right.
Well, my follow-up question was going to be to Ms. Keller, and what is good engineering practice, in your opinion, under these circumstances for such a report? Is it annual? Is it every 2 years, or?
Well, what I've seen done in...
Assuming no adverse conditions in the interim.
Right. What I've seen done on other projects is that they, upon request, would provide the town with the inspections. So it would be if the town wants to see them, they have to, so that gives the property owner he needs to keep these records, because they could be asked of him at any time. We've also seen a requirement of the annual inspections provided to the town for 3 years. So it's not like they have to do it every year, because I don't know if the town wants to look at them every year.
Well, what's your experience with good building inspectors out there? When you submit these things on an annual basis, do they really sit down and review them if there's no problem?
But if you have it for the first 3 years, so after a couple of years, you should know if there's going to be a real problem. So then that way you could pick it. At 3 years, I say, because that's what I've, in my experience, have seen in the past that people have required.
And by that time, if there were any, you have so many variable conditions in that 3-year period, if there was a problem, it would manifest itself. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mullen, I'm sorry not to interrupt your examination or your train of thought.
You looked at Mr. Giuliano's letter. Is he here?
I don't believe so.
No.
I read the letter. It seemed good to me. Maybe we could hear from Mr. Johanning at some point, just to make an affirmative representation as to what it says and what it means. But in your opinion, and it's your testimony, that not only is this not creating a detriment to the abutters, but it's also not impacting anything that's going on with respect to not just Thayer's property, but what Thayer has been obligated to do by this board in connection, or by the town in connection with similar type issues.
Yes, in my opinion,
Okay.
this design
Okay.
would meet those requirements. Briefly, just to mention, as mentioned, Eaglebrook did review the previous design layout. I
Right.
did go back and forth with a couple of iterations, just to identify a few, maybe for a level of conservatism in the design. We chose an infiltration rate originally that was consistent with the soil testing that we had on site. Michael Giuliano asked us to reduce that, which made it to say that the water would infiltrate a tad slower. So we did that. It increased the design slightly, but that was a level of conservatism that he asked us to put into the design.
Okay.
That was one of the the major component of his review. We did that. We kept that. We continued it through the design, and I believe that's why ultimately his final letter, we had no further requests from him.
Why is the driveway asphalt?
It was just a preference.
Well, with all the concern about the introduction of impervious area, would it not make sense to have something that's a little bit less harsh in terms of water runoff?
Well, to be...
I don't want to re-engineer it, I'm just
No,
interested in it.
to be honest, it's a conservative, it's impervious, so that if they choose to put something that's pervious down, again, that's a level of conservatism, so we've designed
Right.
a system that would handle it. If you put gravel down, I've seen it, especially with the winter months with plowing, you do more damage because you plow the gravel onto the lawn, you make a, and then you've got to redo it. You get ruts in it, and it does technically compact to very close to being the same infiltration components that you would have with a paved driveway. And unless they choose to have a different driveway, this was what we would consider a conservative design.
And reasonable under the circumstances.
There's no further questions.
I have just one question, and it's an indelicate question. How many years have you been doing stormwater design and management engineering? Approximately,
Yeah.
just
You have to do the math.
25, 30, since 1993. Great. I have to be frank to tell you, I don't know Merrill, but
Yes.
is stormwater design analysis a significant portion of Merrill's practice?
It is because it's a component in every design pretty much that we do.
Okay, great. Mrs. King, do you have any questions?
Did you leave me any?
I don't know.
I don't know.
You should take my chair and have some fun.
I agree with that.
Well, I know you would, that's why I mentioned it. If you
No,
don't have any questions,
I
that's
don't.
fine. I'm sorry we usurped all your questions. I'm afraid if we start asking more questions, we're going to get confused, and I think I understand things now.
Right, that's the main thing.
Mrs. McGettrick, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Let's see. I really appreciate having the engineering questions addressed by the engineer, so I certainly don't want to, I can't add anything to that. We did bring some kind of architectural drawings, because at one point somebody had said, I think Mr. Mullen had said he wanted to see how the house would look on the site, so
Would you
we'll
like
just
to see
provide those if you would.
Mr. Mullen would like to see those.
It's an important neighborhood. It's a big-time house.
These are renderings, these are architectural renderings of the way it will look.
Too flat, it's not going to be that flat.
So that's the back of the house, obviously.
What's the facade? What's the type? What's
Brick.
brick? White brick? Gray brick?
Line washed. These aren't accurate at all, they're just line washed brick.
Okay.
It's the design is accurate, but I don't know.
And these are conceptuals, obviously.
They are, yes.
Okay. I'll break your hearts.
Basically, I mean, I would just comment that, and I have know nothing about architecture, that because of the site and the high water table, this is not an especially high or towering house design, and that's because it has, it has to be at a greater elevation. That was apparent in the original plans, and I can see it a little bit in these drawings. That doesn't mean that it's a small house, but some of the houses that are being built today are really enormous, even within our height guidelines. But this house doesn't appear overwhelmingly tall.
It doesn't appear to be
on the
gigantic.
site.
It's
As
very
far
tasteful.
as far as vegetating the site, I know the plants require certain things. And I know that a lot of the site is open. I think it's possible that you will end up planting additional trees.
Yes.
And I believe your view would be, you can represent yourself, but I think that if you plant more trees, that's desirable in terms of water absorption.
Yes, absolutely.
Those are my only other comments.
Okay, I was going to say, the only thing that breaks my heart, and maybe yours too, is I like the barn. I thought that was a great idea. I can imagine living in there and having your office in there, and so it's,
It was a beautiful idea.
yeah, it was.
Probably added a lot of expense, so I
Sorry,
don't know
Mr. I'm
what other
wasting
problems it
Mr. Mullins'
added.
time. Okay, if you've finished, Mrs. McKettrick, let me ask if, is there anyone who has any questions of the applicants? Mr. Johanning, you want to come up?
Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive. I just wanted to, I am really appreciative of the Stokels' cooperation with our request, and, you know, I think they've really been good neighbors so far. The only thing I want to reiterate is what was on page 2 of Mr. Giuliano's letter, and he's saying EES would recommend that the town consider the following: on-site inspections of the dry wells and rain garden during construction by a third-party engineer qualified to perform the work. The inspection should include the inspection of the bottom of the bed, the wash stone, rain garden media, the rain garden plants, and the elevations of the stormwater controls. The applicant to provide an as-built plan documenting amount of impervious areas, site grading, ground cover, and elevations of the stormwater controls to ensure that the constructed improvements do not deviate from the proposed design. It is our opinion that any deviation from the design may affect the results of the stormwater analysis, therefore may have an adverse impact on the downstream properties. So, you know, based on what you know, my concern in the last zoning board of appeals hearing, I really feel like ongoing there has to be some inspection to make sure that especially the elevations remain consistent with the plan. Another concern I have is once these conditions are incorporated into a special permit, what happens as time goes by? Let's say ownership transitions to another family or another person. What happens then? That person is required to do the same as the Stokels do?
Well, I'd like to ask Mrs. McGettrick that question, but she's taking her leave for a minute, so we'll wait and ask her that. But I do think it does run with the land. They're certainly not personal to the applicants, because otherwise they could just
So
transfer
whatever-
it to a trust and say that these don't apply.
Yeah, so the requirements, and particularly the enforcement of the drainage plan and all that kind of stuff, it goes on and on and on and on forever, right? Okay.
I think that's right. Nothing lasts forever, but for a long time.
I would appreciate it, you know, if that would be specifically required in the special permit. I trust the Stokels, but I don't know who comes next, so, okay.
No,
thank you.
that's well put.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Mrs. McGettrick, you're back. I'm sorry. I didn't see you there. You were sitting right behind Mr. Johanning. Do you agree with us? You're more of a real estate lawyer than I am. But these conditions would run with the land, but they're not. They're
Yes,
certainly not
well, I would
personal.
view any conditions that you impose in the special permit to be permanent.
Right.
That would include any conditions relating to the stormwater drainage plan and anything relating to it.
Great. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard? Yes, sir.
Richard Bonomi, 60 Forest Street.
Good. Welcome to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Bonomi.
I have a question. First question is it a total of 2,691 cubic yards, or is that above and beyond the first 1,000 cubic yards?
Well, I think it's a total.
That's total, okay. That's a serious amount of fill. That's 135 20 cubic yard truck loads to come into a lot like that. Again, if it works and the water flows properly, I don't think that's a problem. The problem is, and all I hear here, is that it's going to infiltrate into the ground. I have a private well that I use for drinking water. On Oldfield's property, there's a couple of private wells. Behind me, there's a private well. I can name over half a dozen of them up there. My next door neighbor's got a private well. Nobody knows where that water infiltrates to. I heard the part of a swimming pool. Again, in the winter around here, you've got to pump it down. I have a swimming pool. I probably pumped it down 10 times already this year because of the amount of rain we had. Okay? I didn't hear anything in consideration of, and believe me, I'm not here to try to stop somebody to build a house. Believe me, I'd be a hypocrite. I'm not here to do that, okay? When you raise the water table, you don't know where that water goes. You only assume. You can only assume. You do all the tests in the world. I didn't hear anything about Chickatawbut Road and Chickatawbut Hill and all that water that flows down Forest Street, and most of it into my property to begin with. I didn't hear any studies done on that. The last
That's
study...
not on their property, is it?
Pardon?
It's not on their property, why would they?
No, but you
Study-
have a hill up there with a tremendous amount of water that runs off of it when it rains, and it's gonna come down there.
Do you have a study that you can show us on?
I don't have, no, I didn't do a study. The study is 32 years of living there. I can tell you exactly what goes on. I don't need to spend an engineer study. Mostly everybody up there has water in their basement at one time or another, or continually. The first study I heard was done with, they studied number 44 Forest Street. Number 44 Forest Street used to own that lot. It was a 4-acre parcel, and it was divided off by Ron Lucio back in about 1987 or 89, right in there. And then he put the barn up. There's fill that's already been brought into it, okay? So when this water runs, okay, it's gonna run down Howland Street if it's an excessive amount of rain, okay? Nobody knows what kind of rain you're gonna have. It's one year we have none, the next year we have an awful lot. We had an awful lot this year. That's my concern. Okay. Why don't, my professional opinion would be, if it's gonna be a brick house, is to raise it up in accordance, put a lower brick shelf on it to make it look like it just goes with the topography of the land. Other than trying to alter a water table. When you alter a water table, again, you don't know where it's going. Everything's gonna infiltrate into the ground. Nobody knows where those veins are down there and how they really run the private wells. Again, I'm on a private well 100% for my water usage. I hear about lawns. Listen, nobody likes a lawn better than I do. I got 1.5 acres of it up there. Okay, but with lawns comes fertilizer, comes all sorts of restrictions, all sorts of, anything to maintenance, okay? Where does it go? How long does it take till it filtrates down? And where does it finally end up? My concern is for the people on Howland Street. I mean, we all know what Thayer Nursery had to do. They got this great big trench in there now because of the water that used to run down there and over the stone wall and onto Howland, and right down into Howland Street. They took a great depth to correct that. I would hate to see that end up being a problem. My other concern is, I've owned many properties with many restrictions on building. Right, raising up the topography to build a piece of property with all sorts of inspections. No one does it. It might last 1 year. There isn't a town that I've ever owned property in, or a state, unless somebody actually goes and looks in the registry of deeds to say, what is this problem here? The town never has the manpower to inspect it. It might look good to begin with, but until it actually starts an operation, nobody really knows what's gonna happen there. Again, I'm not here to try and stop them from building a house. Build a barn too, build two, if you want. That's a serious amount of fill for that area. Again, the water table. Change the water table, you're gonna change an awful lot of things. There's a lot of unknowns. I'm sure your study is fine. I'm sure you know what you're talking about. Okay, and it all looks good. Figures always look good until they're proven. And that's, like I say, And if the town has a bylaw of 1,000 cubic feet, and they keep altering it, what's the sense of having that bylaw? I'll bring an instance up here. There's a gentleman on Harlan Street that was in here one day, and wanted to cut down 7 trees to put in another driveway. Well, he got all sorts of opposition, myself included, because of cutting the trees down. That wasn't against his driveway. We're not going to build in his house, okay? They told him no. Well, there's a couple of the trees that are gone now. And my suggestion is, go look at the property and go look at the trees that are
Who
there.
told them no?
Pardon?
Who told them no? You said they were up here. Where were they?
No, he had a meeting here about taking 7 trees down.
Where? At the Board of Appeals?
Yes,
It was the planning board.
the planning board, I'm sorry. Yeah. The planning board told him, no, they're down. Several of them are down. The rest of them, the roots are all exposed, and all the dirt washes down Harlan Street and down into the brook.
Why don't you go to the planning board?
Why?
Why doesn't somebody go to the planning board?
Because they were told no to begin with, and then nobody did anything about it. He just did what he wanted to do. Now the damage is done. Again, damage is done. Nobody's going to inspect this thing. Nobody's going to enforce it. They can't even enforce the traffic pattern up there. I mean, please, build your house. You spend a lot of money. I wish you the best of it. I really do. It's nice. But there's other, there's a lot of serious ramifications that come from this. Again, septic systems up there fail left and right. Within 10-year periods, that these septic systems are failing. Everybody that I know up there that owns a house up there has replaced their septic system. Within,
Is that because the technology has improved?
No, it's because
That the
of
old
high water table.
the old technology wasn't as good as it is
man,
today?
I didn't hear, did they do a perk test on this?
We did, yes.
What was the test?
We did multiple tests within the system, the leach field system. It was reviewed with the septic design through Board of Health.
Well, what was the test?
I'd have to pull out, I don't
Okay.
have the report.
Okay. I mean, it can pass. It can
It
pass through it.
passed.
Yeah, well,
It's not a 2-minute perk, that's for sure.
it's not a good perk. No, I know it's not a good perk because it was always
It's
wet
the
down there.
best, but you can design a system with a 20-minute perk.
Okay.
Again, okay, it's something to really take a good look at. The house across the street, the septic system isn't 10 years old, and they replaced it. The one next door just got replaced. The one down around the corner got replaced. Both of my neighbors got replaced, okay? So it's a concern. I mean, I hate to see them get into this bill. That's not a cheap bill to replace a septic system today. And you can bat $50,000 without batting an eyelash on that thing. Again, Baltimore water table, I'm not speaking for the other neighbors, but I think you can create a lot of trouble. And if it happens, who's going to be liable for it? Is the board going to take responsibility because they allowed it? Who would be liable for this if they allowed something to go through and it actually
Who
failed?
would be liable? I don't know. You're asking me to give you legal advice. I
Well,
can't
no, I'm just
do
asking,
that.
who would be liable, if you allowed, the board
Nobody's,
allowed-
you're using liable in a loose sense, you think.
Okay.
Who would be responsible to see?
Responsible, okay.
To see that the system is kept up to snuff and is properly inspected? You'd go to the building inspector in the first instance, and if you didn't like what he was doing, you'd come to the Board of Appeals.
I can only honestly say that, probably going in all the towns and states, nobody's ever got the time to inspect anything. It just doesn't happen. Nobody has that list when they sign someone. Like, it's a great theory, it's a great protection there, but unless somebody really knows it's there, they don't enforce, they can't enforce it. They never have the money or the manpower. Again, I'm not here trying to stop them building a house, okay? I wish we the best one, but they're in for a lot of money, okay? I just want to see it come out right, and I want to see it on the neighbors end up with something, because of a design, a poor design. Not saying it's a poor design, take that back. Of something that might not work, okay? I mean, we have bylaws.
Do you think this design for this particular house, in its proposed state, is more sophisticated and more technical than 98% of the houses on Forest Street?
No.
You don't think engineering practices have improved sufficiently so that they could design a much more efficient and protective stormwater drainage system? That's something that's built 45 years ago, like most of the houses on Forest Street.
No,
You don't.
that's not true. On Forest Street, most of the houses were built less than 32 years ago.
Okay, well, let's say 32 years
There's
ago.
only 9 of them, okay? There's only a couple of people there. Thayer's house was there for a long time. 71 was there. Lou Parks up in the end built it probably maybe 40 years ago. But beyond that, everything else up there is new, relatively new, okay?
Okay,
You know, since about 86 or 87, 91,
okay.
10 years ago. No, they're not old houses.
10 to 20 years ago.
Yeah, if you took an average.
Okay.
Yeah. There's not many, there's only room for 10 houses on the whole street anyhow, so.
So how many, let me ask you this, just as a matter of my own curiosity, that's nothing to do with this case, but nothing directly to do with this case, but how many other lots are up on Forest Street that are potentially buildable? Is this the
There's
last?
none.
This is the last one?
Mine, I have one.
You have one, next to your house?
Pardon?
Is it adjacent to your house or part of?
Yes, I have 3 acres up there.
Okay.
I have the right to subdivide it. When I built the house, it was always with I have the right to subdivide. I won't. I will never subdivide. I will never subdivide it. Actually, I might turn the house over to the conservation when
Oh,
no one else to give it to, so I'll give it to them.
that'd be noble.
And I would.
Now you know what kind of system to
I'm a
install if you want to
conservationist.
build a house. Thank you very much, Mr. Bernard. We appreciate your coming. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard regarding this application? And there's no such person. Mrs. McGetrick, do you have any final remarks, or are you content?
I don't really have any summary remarks. I guess I've just asked Deborah if she could address this issue of altering or increasing the water table. It's my understanding that that's not, that the proposal is not doing that, is not proposed to do that, but if you could clarify my own understanding a little bit, I would appreciate it.
The goal, granted, all of the systems that we're proposing here have a component of infiltration, but the intent is to infiltrate enough water to match the existing conditions, which means the amount of water that is being absorbed by the soil or surface area on the site is what we're trying to match, so that the peak flow of surface runoff coming off the site is no greater than existing conditions, both peak rate and volume. So we're not asking these systems to infiltrate all of the water on the site. There will be surface runoff coming off the property. I hope that clears it up. We're not trying to change groundwater. I would definitely say that would be an endeavor that I
Could anybody afford that?
would be a tough call.
Even President Trump may have trouble doing that. Mr. Mullen?
The way I interpreted the statement is not, I don't think, I agree with you. It doesn't seem to me that the table is changing, but the elevation of the property is changing, so the relative location of the top of the water with respect to the surface is being altered, because it's going to be the ground is going to be higher than it is today.
True.
In that sense, it's changing, but otherwise, the groundwater is going to be the same elevation it is today.
Correct. I would
Right.
submit as well that the fill that we're bringing in is most likely going to be better than the material that's currently on site.
Where's that coming from, do you know?
I don't know, but it would be the standard gravel fill, which is, I can tell you right now, is better than the material that's on the property now.
It's mostly loamy, right? Silty.
Silty.
Yeah.
So the gravel
I
fill.
mean, that you're bringing in is on
Well,
that's on the
it's just,
site?
this is very silty, it says in the report. Yeah.
Yeah. So that fill material would actually have a better infiltration component, or be able to absorb and hold more water than the site itself.
Anything else,
The
Mary?
only concluding remarks then I would make, just this issue of maintenance of drainage structures is a major issue, because it's a major issue for their nursery, and I've certainly been very involved with their permitting and all of that discussion. And also on a number of other sites that are new sites. So it's true, I mean, that you need to put the stormwater management system in, or the stormwater plan needs to be installed as called for on the plan. But there are maintenance requirements, and all of these plans have a section with a series of steps that have to be taken. And these are fairly detailed requirements. There's work that has to be done. Some of it can be done by the homeowner. Some of it you need to bring somebody in to do. It involves cleaning out structures, making sure that vegetation is thriving and replacing it if it isn't. And on a regular basis in a rain garden, it sounds like vegetation has to be replaced because it doesn't thrive usually after a year. It needs to be replaced. So there are substantial requirements imposed on a homeowner today. Certainly, if the plan is one required by the town, and the town imposes those requirements, if the board wants to make them a condition of a permit, we've already presented and made part of the public record what the plan is and what the maintenance requirements are. That would make sense, I would think. As far as inspections go, the homeowner could be required to provide a report to the building inspector annually. And although I know the building inspector is extremely busy and he has an assistant and they're hard-pressed to do everything they have to do, when a report has to be filed with the building department, they do look at it. And they can ask the town engineer to look at it too if they feel there have been concerns. But the main test of what's happening with these systems is what happens. So if during the first year after the house is built, there are complaints filed with the building inspector relating to drainage, then there's going to be more scrupulous examination of the maintenance and whether it's being followed. Ultimately, if something isn't working, then there may need to be a future change or an improvement or an added drainage structure. And you can only tell that after you finish your construction and begin to live on the site. I guess everybody is, perhaps it's possible rain is increasing, the flow is increasing, conditions change from year to year. So it's always possible that an issue like this would have to be addressed in the future, and that would be the homeowner's obligation to address it. Because if flow is increasing onto neighboring properties, then they're violating their own requirement, which is that they can't increase the flow, and that applies to other properties in the area too. Everybody has that obligation. So that's what I would have to say in terms of enforcement or supervision or requirement. I think the board can impose some of those things as conditions if they feel it's appropriate.
Great. Thank you very much, Mrs. McGettrick. If there's nobody else who wants to be heard, we'll end the evidence portion of this hearing and discuss the application here in open session and see if we can vote on it this evening. Mr. Jeffrey Mullins, you want to be heard first?
I'm impressed by the application. I think it's a tricky problem, and I've forgotten the gentleman's name who spoke.
Bonomi.
Mr. Bonomi has articulated it now twice in front of us. However, and I think this is a particularly sensitive area, given some of the issues we've had with Thayer. So I'm impressed by the fact that Estabrook had looked like a peer review of Merrill's work, and basically came to the same conclusions. I think the conditions that are in their letter are reasonable, and to the extent the board votes to adopt this and to grant the special permit, I think they should be incorporated as requirements into and I don't think there's an objection from the applicant as to that. I think on the monitoring during construction, that's addressed in the Estabrook letter. I like the idea of self-reporting. It doesn't impose an obligation on the part of the building inspector, but I agree with the applicant's counsel that the building inspector will read that, and there's still a professional duty to, be truthful to the, first of all, a duty on the part of the person doing the review, and then the owner to be truthful to the town. But I don't think that should be forever. I think you said it was 3 years was maybe a good professional standard. It feels to me like 3 years of self-reporting on compliance with the plan that was submitted with the application. I think it's a pollution discharge plan, I think. Makes sense to be accompanied with or to go along with the inspection of the soil. I've forgotten what you've called it. I'm sorry.
Subsurface?
No. What's the title of the plan that the stormwater design analysis plan?
Yes.
I think that takes care of both and of course the submittal of the as-built plan. I think that takes care of two of the primary issues, respecting the fact that I agree, towns don't do a good job following up. I think that's a fair point. But I think in this case, it's very sophisticated installation that you're looking at, and the property owner has every incentive to maintain it after the investment that they're making. But I don't know that it should go on forever, given the fact that that seems a little bit more beyond best practices. I suppose the building inspector, if he requires that, could ask for that down the road, or we could further consider it. I think we should say something about the quality of the fill. It should be a type of fill that's certainly clean, required by the bylaw, of course, but also of a type that's better than the fill that's there, because that's the testimony. And I don't think the board should get into the detail of, the size of the stone or the rock but it should be better than what's there now, since a lot of these issues really stem from the soil condition. I think the requirement that the special permit should specifically run with the land and affirmatively require them to record the permit makes sense. I say that because people, maybe not always are recording these special permits. I know they're recording variances, but that seems to me to be a good thing to do, and was requested by the abutter, Mr. Joe Henning. So with that, I don't have anything else to say, other than, I'm impressed by the amount of work that's gone into this, and seems like a good improvement to me.
Okay, Mrs. King.
Well, I do agree with my colleague, Jeff. I think he's covered most of the things that I was going to cover. I guess what we need to decide what we want to do is are we incorporating what the suggestion from Merrill, altered slightly by Mr. Giuliano's recommendations, and who do they report to, and how is it done? I'm a little bit concerned about that. But I believe that self-reporting probably is the best thing, and that way there is a record of it with the town. If something goes wrong and it appears that there's more drainage than is expected, the neighbors would have the opportunity to check with the building department and see if that has been complied with. And I think that would be a good way to make sure that things stay positive. So whether it lasts forever or for how long, well, we don't know how it's needed, but I think that 3 years is certainly necessary. Your expertise is certainly more than mine in this, but I almost feel that 3 years might be a little bit short, since we're talking about 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storms. Do I think it should cover a 100-year storm? I don't know. Does that mean that we want to make sure that that these are reported for 100 years? It seems excessive. But I think maybe something a little bit more than 3 would be appropriate.
Have you finished?
I have.
Okay.
Speedy Gonzales.
Well, you were speedy. A woman of few words.
Tell that to my husband.
No, I won't. Excuse me, I've got a cold. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble tonight. I'd like to start out by, first of all, congratulating Mrs. McGettrick. I thought the application was very well presented. It's a complex application. It's had months of twists and turns. And I think that the materials that you filed make it clear the distinction between what this is and what the other one was. And I want to thank all of the neighbors for coming, Mr. Joe Henning and Mr. Bonomi. We appreciate all of your comments. And I actually thought that the presentation by Ms. Keller was terrific. You may have to present these things to the 4th grade level to have us understand it, because when we try to read something like this, it's mysterious. But I think you did a wonderful job explaining the situation, and here we we have I guess the normal interplay in a place where you have high water tables of the new and the old, and what's fair and what's not fair, and how do you take care of everyone's position as best one can. I think that the system that I see and the plan that I see from Ms. Keller's firm is very sophisticated. I think it's she thinks it's adequate. The statistics seem to think they're adequate. She's touched all the bases, and I'm not going to ask the important question, but that is, this is an expensive plan to implement, and this is an expensive property to develop. And that's the sad part of it. And it's I understand a big commercial facility like there, and they make a lot of money, and hopefully they're still making a lot of money and all of that, and their property is so massive it has an influence on neighboring properties and the like, but here we have a house lot. Admittedly, it's a 2.5-acre house lot or something like that. It's a substantial house lot, and this is a beautiful house, but and they're being held to a high standard. And the people 25 years ago weren't held to this standard, and they didn't have to put in this type of system. And so that's kind of the difficulty with modern development and modern technology and all of this. So my thought was that I thought it was very helpful to us, and to me in particular, to see Merrill Engineering in Eaglebrook being productive for everyone's best interests. And I think that's very, very helpful. And I think it made this hearing a lot easier, and I think it made the solutions that are being proposed both by Merrill and by Mr. Giuliano, I think, productive and helpful to our deciding this case and granting the type of permit that's being requested here. I would have thought that 3 years would be enough in terms of the independent, the filings with the town and all of that. Ms. Keller thinks that's reasonable, but I understand Ginny's perspective, and I'm open to making that for a little longer period of time. The issue is to make this reasonable for everyone's protection, but also make it reasonable for the landowners, the owners here, who young kids building the house of their dreams, and they're having to spend a lot of money just to get to this point, and then to put this into practice is going to be very expensive. To maintain it, it's going to be very expensive. And I hope you folks can do a lot of this work yourself by walking into the rain garden and with clippers and rakes and all of that, but boy, that's hard work. I don't have the ability to do it. Maybe you have to be very young to do it. But sure, you can help yourself by doing a lot of that work. But I think a lot of it needs professional assistance as well, for many reasons. You don't want to injure yourself, and you both want to have a happy marriage. But leaving all that aside, I think that the conditions imposed are reasonable. I think the only condition that I quibble with just a little bit, and it's on Mr. Giuliano's report. I think, as Mr. Johanning suggested, we should adopt both of those points. But I think the issue that causes me concern is the on-site inspections, according to Mr. Giuliano. He wants by a third-party engineer. And I don't know that that's really necessary here. I think that can be easily conducted by Merrill. And I think, since they work together, Merrill and Giuliano, I don't think there's going to be any issue whatsoever. And I just have a concern that trying to introduce a third-party engineer who has the skill sets of Ms. Keller here, and has to read all of this stuff, review the hearing, review our decision, walk the land, that it's going to be, I think, an unfair burden on the applicants that I don't think is necessary. They're being represented by a first-class engineering firm and a first-class engineer, and Mr. Johanning has hired somebody who knows what they're doing, and so I think that I would not adopt that part of the two conditions. I would have it done by an engineer qualified to perform the work. And my guess would be that would be Merrill, but if it isn't, that's the landowner's choice. But I just think that could be a very tricky and an expensive one-word, two words, hyphenated, third party. I think that means big money, and I don't want to, we're imposing a lot of conditions on them, and I think that's too much. But beyond that, my position is that I intend to vote for this variance. I think that everybody here is very interested in seeing that this area is protected. The applicants are, Mr. Bonomi is, and I think everyone down there. Hopefully it can be a big, happy family and not a difficult event. So I intend to vote in favor of this particular variance. Mr. Mullen, what do you say about the 3 to 5 years, and what do you say about the issue of independent engineers as opposed to just qualified engineers?
You know, I'm not concerned with the money. I think the third party is a good point. I mean, I don't know that we need a third engineering firm to conclude the same thing that the previous two. I was wondering whether or not it might not be reasonable to have the inspection done by a qualified engineer, but also have it affirmatively stated, maybe this is the case anyway, and perhaps Mrs. McKettrick mentioned this, that the building inspector needs to sign off on this prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. I don't quite know how that works.
Well, he's going to rely on the certification by the engineer that everything was built according to...
No, I know he will, but affirmatively requiring him to sign off is kind of like a third party too. It's another set of eyes, is what I'm saying.
Well, it is, but it's like my going to the doctor and having a diagnosis, and I have to say, you've gone to Harvard, you know what you're talking about. I don't know what's going on in there. Mr. Prondak is a wonderful guy, but this is a highly specialized area, and I assume he has to rely on the skill sets and the experience of Miss Merrill.
Okay.
You know, it's just...
In terms of the 3 to 5, I don't feel strongly. I don't feel like I'm expert enough to make a qualified statement, so I'm happy to go with the pleasure of the board.
Okay. Now, Jenny, what do you have to say about the issue of whether there should be an independent engineer, and what's the length of the...
I think it makes sense that the people that, well, it doesn't need to be a third-party engineer, because I think that certainly if Merrill were to be inspecting it, they know it ice cold, and they can, pretty easily make a determination on what's going on. So I don't feel strongly that a third party needs to do it.
Okay. And how about the time limit, or the time frame for...
You know, it's only 2 years difference, so I'm not wedded to it. I'm not wedded to it.
I know who you are wedded to, but what do you, what's your opinion? Do you want to do 4 years? Do you want to split the difference between the 3 and the 5?
Sure.
I mean, I don't think it makes much difference for another year.
No.
If you have a better comfort level, that gives everyone a chance to see what's going on.
Well,
I mean, I'll do anything.
Yeah,
I'll do 3 or 4 years. I think 5 years is too much, but beyond that, I'm flexible. So you call it.
4.
4 years. Okay. Mr. Mullen, you agreeable to that?
Yep.
Okay. So all those in favor of granting the special permit with the amount of fill requested and the conditions that we've suggested and agreed upon here, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, specifically note for the record that the board has made a finding that this is not more detrimental to the neighborhood, which I think is the standard in the bylaw.
It is, and we so find.
Okay.
Mrs. McGettrick, they say the days are getting short and the nights are getting long here. We're getting into September. Can you tell us what the applicants are planning to do here in terms of getting this project going?
Well, as you know, they cannot get a building permit until the special permit becomes final, which means a written decision has to be filed, 20 days appeal period has to elapse. So there's always going to be a delay in between your decision and when they can begin work. they can tell us where they are in terms of final design plans. What are your, what would be your hope for?
Design plans are final.
Okay.
Our concern right now is just whether it makes economic sense to build there in the winter or wait.
Well, that's the tough issue.
Yeah. It's always a guess, really, as to what.
So in a sense, I don't want to turn everyone upside down. This is a somewhat complicated decision. I don't want to turn everyone upside down if the applicants are going to be building in March or April. On the other hand, if you were going to start to do something in the spring, strike it in the wintertime, that would be of substance, then the sooner you can get a special permit done and allowed, the better off you are. So if we assume that you're going to go forward sooner rather than later, which is usually a fair assumption, then the question is getting this done. I can't get this done for 4 to 6 weeks. I've got a brief with the appeals court and several other matters, so that's a problem for me. Is there anyone who has things that can be done in a sooner? I don't know, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I got a couple that I owe you, and I'm sorry,
Oh, the
John.
board. Okay, you understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're tied up. Ginny, how about you? Do you feel comfortable doing this in the short run, or?
I won't be able to get it done shortly, no.
Okay.
Oh, God.
I mean, I can try to draft something for the board, but you're still going to have to spend time on it, I know that.
Well, I don't mind spending time, but the problem with it is putting together original work in an area where we have little comfort level, except what my notes say and what Ms. Keller's report says, takes time.
Sure.
And we want to write a report that's worthy of the time and effort that the applicants have put into this. So if, I'll tell you this, it would expedite things if you were able to put together a draft opinion or a draft decision.
I'm happy to do that. I understand the board may do a lot more work on it in this case, just because of the type of application it is.
Well, no, I don't.
And I always understand that, but yes, and I would have some time to prepare a draft in the next few weeks.
Then that'd be perfect. That'd be a great solution. So why don't you do that?
Okay.
And we appreciate that. Is anything else we need to do that we haven't done? Okay, you all set? Do you have any other questions, Mrs. McGettrick?
I don't.
Okay, well, great. I'm going to say congratulations to the applicant. Thanks for Mr. Johanning and Mr. Bonomi for coming, and good luck to everybody in this interesting project, and we're adjourned. Thank you, Ms. Keller, for coming tonight.
Thank you very much.